Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 258 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin. I at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by a wonderful guest tonight. He is Daniel Flick, now with the correct Twitter handle under him. It is at by Daniel Flick now. He's moved. He's evolved. He's no longer just covering the draft. Daniel, of course, remains covering the Falcons, but Daniel, you have taken on several new beats as well. So you're really branching out into Indiana football and then soon Indiana basketball. Is that right?
That is indeed correct. Yeah, those would be accurate claims. Yeah.
Yes.
Very busy, very, very enjoyable. Living the dream. It's also it's been rewarding, but it's also been kind of funny because, if you look at my, tweets of Indiana stuff, it gets, zero interaction. And, I'll fire off a Falcons tweet and then, just skyrockets, which I love.
Oh, yeah.
Again, shout out all the followers on Twitter. Very successful Sunday on Twitter. Or X, apologies, Elon. But, yeah, no. So, all about it. All about it. But,
the X,
yeah, no. So, taking on, for sure, a lot of new responsibilities, but, always and forever still a Falcons reporter, first and foremost, until that changes long term. But you know what? We just locked up a new deal to where I should be covering the Falcons for a pretty long time. So that's good.
Good to hear it. I know everyone has been really enjoying your coverage, myself included, and we just had to have you back on, especially since Adnan's playing hooky tonight to go, I guess, hang out with Matt Ryan or something like that. No,
big league.
Yeah, Adnan apparently met Matt Ryan today, and we haven't heard from him since. So I imagine Matt Ryan got a hold of all of Adnan's Matt Ryan hate, and we don't know what has happened since then. But I would not want to be trapped at a conference with a potentially angry Matt Ryan. So, I feel like we've seen him get angry. He's very even keeled usually, but with Matt, you could always tell there's a little bit of a dark side underneath. So, I'm hoping for Adnan's safety, and I guess we'll get a report hopefully next week if he does resurface.
Yeah, I really need someone to kind of work on a scoop here with Adnan because I feel like we need some kind of inside reporting. You know what? Matt Ryan's on the media side now. I mean, if I were him, I would just break the scoop.
Yeah, maybe he will. Scoop. Falcons co-host, Falcons show co-host mysteriously disappears at a business conference. Last seen with Matt Ryan, breaking news from Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan's a man of many talents. So I would not, we'll just hope for the best there. Adnan may have some explaining to do, but Matt Ryan also seems like a reasonable man. So I think they can work it out.
Yeah, I would agree. Matt's always, he's always come across as a Swiss Army knife. So, you know what? Adnan too, though. I've never seen a guy, pull off the some of the looks that he pulled off in training camp. Some of those polos were very bold, and I mean, just stellar on the young man. So, very, very versatile, very, very versatile reporter there in Adnan.
Yes, yeah, and again with the bucket hat, with the sleeveless shirts, sometimes he could really bring a lot. He can bring a lot to the table from a fashion standpoint. So definitely a big fan of his contributions. And of course, we'll get Adnan back on here next week, guys, for you as well. But Daniel and I are going to take us home tonight. We're going to get into all kinds of topics. Obviously, the topic of the hour is Desmond Ridder. But before we dive in, let me get you a quick word from our sponsor, betonline.ag, folks. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info, with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns that you need. You can also get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds, from week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl. BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. So make sure to head to that website today, betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Just remember to use our promo code BELIEVE to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Remember, guys, that is betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE, to get that sweet, sweet 50% match on your first deposit. Guys, BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Daniel, we got a lot of ground to cover tonight, but we haven't really gotten your take at all since the season started. Obviously, you came on several times during training camp and everything else. But before we dive into Ridder, just want to get your take sort of on how you feel about where the team is going into week 5, because it's been kind of all over the place. So where are you mentally with the Falcons at this stage?
It's kind of like what we were talking about before we went on air. You have 2 weeks that are very encouraging, and then you have 2 weeks where really they just look nothing like the first 2 weeks as far as how competitive they were. And I mean, really, they're a non-12-point comeback away from being 1-3 right now. Again, that's obviously a pretty big if, and that's not at all. Obviously, if any fan base knows about the ifs of close games, it's Atlanta. So again, I'm not trying to take anything away from the Falcons there, but I think there's reason for optimism when you look at the way that Ryan Nielsen has Atlanta's defense playing right now. And I think typically, historically, offenses take a little bit longer to really fire off. And so I think if you're the optimist type, I think that's one of the guiding hopes for you. I still tend to think that Atlanta's offense has been nothing short of brutal the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's, for me, when I watch that group, it looks so hesitant and just completely, Adnan was saying in training camp quite a bit about how there was just no explosiveness there. And I think a lot of us are kind of like, oh, I mean, it's pretty early still. I'm sure they'll kind of open up eventually. We have not seen that. And I was kind of reflecting on that on Sunday. They played at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So I had a lot of time on Sunday to kind of sit there and reflect. And I kind of returned to camp and I thought about some of those moments of where the offense just was not good enough. And again, there was that hope they'd figure it out. And there's still that hope they'll figure it out. Eventually they have to actually put substance behind it and figure it out. I think they played a fine fourth quarter against Carolina. I think they played a fine, again, fourth quarter, really second half against Green Bay. And other than that, they've had, 11 quarters or so, 12 quarters of really bad offensive football. They've scored, I believe, 19 first half points this year. They've scored an average of like 7.3 points in the first half in Ridder's 8 games as a starter. That's not going to get the job done. And so I don't want to touch too much on that topic right now, but I think on the overall big picture of the team, the more that you look at where the Falcons are right now, the more that you feel like they've got a long way to go to reach, the ceiling that a lot of us felt like they could reach. And I think they're still confident that they can, but until the offense finds a way to figure it out, I don't really think the ceiling that a lot of us set as a realistic ceiling is feasible.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. And it's been disappointing, certainly. I mean, we've seen some good things, particularly in the run game, where it's been excellent at times and dominant, multiple times, week 2 being a standout as well as last week. But the run game alone, it just, when the passing game is as bad as it has been these last 2 weeks, teams just load up to stop it. And it makes it really hard to sustain drives because nothing can go wrong when you're that reliant on the run game. You can't get behind the sticks. You got to keep things rolling. And as we know, it hasn't gone great. Like they do make mistakes. Desmond Ridder puts the ball in harm's way quite a bit. He's been doing that basically all year. And the last 2 games, it's really turned up a notch in terms of actually people catching the interceptions. But at least I think in the first 2 weeks, we saw Ridder rebound from sort of a tough first half to come back in the second half and play quite well, especially in the Packers game where that fourth quarter was about as perfect as you could. I mean, I know people were hating on, are sort of already going back and revising it and saying, actually, it wasn't that good. No, that fourth quarter performance was excellent. Like that was, if you're hopeful for Desmond Ridder, you're hoping that fourth quarter is more of a sign of what's to come than these last 2 games. But so far, we really just have that quarter and everything else has kind of been disappointing. But, Let's stay positive at first before we dive into Ridder. How surprised are you with the play of the defense? Because I mean, I was just shocked. Like I was expecting it to be like, if we could get to average, that would be great. But they're a top 10 defense and they've played some legitimate offenses now. So I don't think this is a mirage. I think we actually have a very good defense for the first time since 2017.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think in the preseason, a lot of people talked about like, Atlanta might actually have a top 10 defense this year. But it's like nobody actually believes it until it actually happens. And so I think it's kind of finally happening now to where you see the result of it on field. Now, I know, it's funny because weeks 1 and 2, all the talk was about how, Atlanta's pass rush is non-existent once again. And it's like the last 2 weeks, everything that was bad early is good, and everything that was good early is bad. So, yeah, but I mean, to answer the overall question, surprise is maybe a little bit of I'd say overstatement, because again, I thought they'd be good. I thought they'd for sure be improved with the amount of talent that they brought in. I think what I've been most impressed with so far is the creativity of Ryan Nielsen, and the way that he's been able to manufacture pressure at times when it hasn't been so natural, especially early in the year. Because I mean, right now Atlanta's on pace to, I'm pretty sure, double their hit total from last year, if not fully, pretty close to it. So after last week, they're probably just about 40% of the way to last year's total through 4 games already. So that alone, I think, is a very, very encouraging sign. The way the whole secondary's played so far, Richie Grant's had a few plays here or there that I'm sure he would like back, but for the most part, he's taken a pretty nice step forward. I think, in my personal opinion, I think that AJ Terrell, Jeff Okudah, Jesse Bates, that trio of guys right there is about as good as the Falcons have had it in quite some time. Okudah so far, again, we're still early, but what he's done through, again, really about a game and a half, because he didn't play that much against Detroit, has been very, very impressive to me. And so I think that the upside in that secondary is so big. I think Alford has been phenomenal playing nickel so far. Yeah. I've seen some people mention Isaiah Oliver. I personally think that the narrative surrounding that is support Isaiah Oliver in San Francisco. He's doing awesome. Atlanta got younger and cheaper at nickel with Alford there, and I'm pretty sure they have zero complaints about how he's played so far. So the pieces were all there. I think Nate Landman's ascension has been huge, especially with Anderson's injury and the way that he's played, how physical he is. His development was something that you and I talked about quite a bit in training camp that looked pretty good. How would it translate? It's translated extremely well. So again, surprised, I'm not sure is the word I was. You know what? I would say maybe pleasantly surprised that they've actually delivered on the expectation. But I think that the whole offseason, I guess kind of after free agency, specifically, but this was kind of the ceiling that we thought they could be. And so far, I think Ryan Nielsen has completely delivered on what we thought he could be. And I think so many of those new additions that we had so much excitement about have also kind of really produced at the level a lot of us thought that they would.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of those things. And it's sort of the opposite of the offense, where like everything we were hoping for with the defense has kind of come true. Like all of the free agent signings more or less have hit and they're playing really well. Even, we were all very excited to see Troy Anderson, unfortunately has that potentially season-ending injury. But then the guy behind him that we were like, well, we might have a little something here. He's playing a lot. He's definitely going to be the third linebacker. Is he finally healthy coming off that college injury? And it's like, yes, he is. And actually he's really good. And he's playing super well. I mean, he's outplaying Troy Anderson at this point, which isn't necessarily shocking given that Troy Anderson this was always going to be his sort of like second like learning year. Troy Anderson's only played linebacker. This would be his like 4th year of ever playing linebacker. So he was going to need to learn the instincts, but the flashes that Troy was providing, you were more than willing to put up with it. And I think he actually, unfortunately, had his best game before he got hurt against the Lions. But Landman comes in and doesn't offer that athleticism and overall coverage ability, but just so sound in the run game. You can tell he just is breaking everything down at a very high level, very instinctive about what to do, where to go. That's been a huge boost to the Falcons defense. And the interior is so stout. The edge rush started out really bad, but it's starting to get there a little bit. Bud Dupree has started to play a little bit better. Lorenzo Carter's making some plays. Arnold Ebiketie getting worked in a little bit more. So like the edge group is still the weakest part of the defense, but they're playing okay, and that's I think what we were hoping for this offseason. Was like, can they just get to like solid? Like we're not expecting miracles, but they can just be okay. We'll be okay, and I think so far that's happened. And then of course the secondary. I think the secondary is the biggest thing that's really come together. I mean, AJ Terrell is excelling in this scheme, which I always thought this sort of man coverage aggressive scheme would be perfect for him. It's finally taking advantage, I think, of a lot of his talent. You mentioned D. Alford already. He's responding really well to this scheme. And then we have one game sample of Jeff Okudah, but so far the returns are looking very promising there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think I want to revisit one of the things you mentioned about the interior pressure. I want to say Grady Jarrett and Onyemata right now are at about 12 to 13 quarterback hits together through 4 weeks, which together that's about a 50 quarterback hit season between the two of them. Atlanta had like 69 total last year. That is from two guys alone on the interior. Incredible. And again, all that's going to do is open up alleyways. And again, that's why I want to stress so much Ryan Nielsen's creativity. When you have two guys who can command as much attention as they are inside right now, those alleyways, and I mean, if it's a Landman, an Ellis, an Alford, even Richie Grant the last few weeks has had several blitz attempts. Like, I mean, the creativity that we're seeing has been really effective in large part because of the alleys that are there, the lanes that are there, and the ability and athleticism and versatility of all the guys Atlanta has. And I think when you look at the pieces that they have, it's not a fluke. And I think that's the most important thing. Is it's not like a ragtag, iffy talent, whatever it may be. No,
Scrappy.
This is scrappy. I know all about scrappy. There will be a time off there where, you and I can talk a little bit about my rec league basketball performances. That's scrappy, very scrappy.
That's a tease. That's a great tease right there. We'll save that for the off season. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we'll get there.
We'll get there.
It's a competitive group. Yes, but it's a competitive group with a whole lot of talent, a whole lot of energy. And clearly they're all very comfortable playing within the system. And I think that's when you have all of those things working together, it really inspires confidence that this is a unit that'll only improve as the year goes on. And again, it's already been so impressive so far, really throughout all three levels. I don't have any complaints with how Atlanta's played defensively so far. And again, even against Jacksonville, really talented offense. You take away Ritter's turnovers and it's possible Jacksonville's looking at a low teens, output. So
they only allowed 13 points, the defense. Mm-hmm. So against Jacksonville, who had scored they were putting up points the first 2 weeks. Obviously, the week before against the Texans, they were struggling a bit. But I mean, it's a good defense, and I love the scheme too. I think it's just my type of scheme. Like, and I'll admit that. Like, Dean Pease is, that zone heavy stuff, like the off coverage and all that absolutely can work and has worked at a high level for many teams. It's just not my preferred style. I really like more of the Nielsen style, which again is a riskier, more aggressive style. But I just think it's more fun to watch, and I think it fits these personnel better. But everyone's doing their job. I think the sort of way they've gone out, evaluated, and gathered the pieces for this defense. I think Terry Fontenot, that we're still waiting to see home runs in the draft. He hasn't drafted poorly, but I think the drafting has been closer to average. But I think the free agency is where we're really seeing his talent. And he's just nailing free agent signings left and right. And like, that's perfectly acceptable. Like, not everyone's a draft genius. And Fontenot also strikes me as the type of guy that says, like, we can continue to bring people in and flesh out our sort of, scouting department and try to figure out where our weaknesses are. But I just love what they've done. They've made it. They want people that defend the run, no matter what the position is. That's why Trey Flowers was starting. I know a lot of people were like, "Why is Trey Flowers out there?" He's defending the run. He could stop the run, and he was I think one of the highest graded run defending corners like in football according to PFF over the first 4 weeks. So like, he was doing that. He wasn't doing much in coverage, but he was stopping the run. And he wants everyone to be able to blitz. And so everybody's got these two skills, and like, obviously it helps if you can cover too, like, if that's what you're doing. But or rush the passer. But getting those two things going, it allows you to put yourself in advantageous third downs, which they really have done a good job of, and you can bring pressure from anywhere. The blitz packages are not predictable, and that allows you to be really chaotic and really catch some teams off guard, because it could be anyone blitzing. It could be either linebacker, it could be both linebacker, it could be the slot corner, it could be either safety. And then you have all the traditional stuff to deal with too. So it's a fun scheme, and I think it's really coming together well through the first 4 games.
Yeah, and it's fun to be able to watch a defense that not only has exotic pressure packages, but effective exotic pressure packages. I can't tell you when the last time is I watched a Falcons defense that can do some of the things that they currently are. And again, I think that's a credit. I love that you mentioned Fontenot's work in free agency. I think that's so important. And again, obviously you expect them to hit with some of the higher money guys that they have. But I mean, even throughout his 2 years before that, I mean, it was consistently hitting on so many guys that were overlooked or at least underpaid for what their value proved to be. And I think that you kind of could see that once he got that money, just kind of how special the end result would be. And as I kind of touched on earlier, we've talked about how high the ceiling can be with the talent that he's brought in. It's just going to be a matter of whether the offense can catch up, really. But, again, we'll keep it positive. We'll talk about just how good Ryan Nielsen has his guys playing. And again, the ability to have the amount of versatile, athletic, high effort, instinctual players that they have is a testament to that entire staff. And then Ryan Nielsen, shout out Jerry Gray as well. Very important part in all that as well. The way that they have those guys playing within the system is so important too. So very, very impressive collective effort so far. Those guys have probably played well enough to be 4-0 right now. So I think all things considered, if you're looking for a positive, you look at Ryan Nielsen, you look at everybody underneath Ryan Nielsen, and you say, that's a guy who knows what he's doing. So
yeah, no, it's true. And we're looking at a playoff defense right here. So hopefully the offense can get up to that level at some point. We'll see. And that'll transition us away from the positivity here in just a second. Well, just now, because we've got some donations coming in that are going to steer, the conversation towards the title. About Desmond Ridder here. So we got George Costanza, of course, with the $2 right off the top. Thank you, George. He says, can we trade Desmond Ridder for a third for Justin Fields? With Ridder, Chicago is guaranteed to tank, and Fields helps us beat up Carolina, which then gives them the higher pick. Come on, TF, let's get it done. Yeah, I mean, the Bears aren't going to trade Justin Fields in season. So that's kind of, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to pursuing Fields in the offseason, but yeah, it's not going to happen in season. And then in the offseason, it's sort of like up to what the Falcons do. Like, I could see them taking like a multifaceted approach, like signing Kirk Cousins like a 2 or 3 year deal, and then trading for Justin Fields for like a day 2 pick or a early day 3 pick. And then or signing Cousins and then drafting someone, like a Shadur Sanders or something like that. And then trying to sort of develop a high upside guy while you have, because I don't think they can just take like a quarterback in the teens or the early 20s where they're probably going to be picking. Like, I don't think that's going to be enough. Like, those guys are probably not going to hit the ground running immediately. And if they're not, I mean, maybe they make the playoffs this year still, but they're in a situation where they kind of need to be winning next year. So they can't really go into the season with an unproven quarterback again, I think. But, we'll see.
Yeah, if they're picking mid-teens, I tend to think that there is a very low chance that it's a quarterback who is taken in the mid-teens, or that they're still picking mid-teens if they still are in need of a quarterback.
Yeah.
So that's my personal opinion on that topic. Again, you and I talked about this a lot at camp, that Arthur Smith it's going to take disaster from here for him to not have a job this time next year. So realistically, if you're looking at it from that mindset of, will they need a quarterback next offseason? Right now, the answer appears to be absolutely. Again, I'll save some of those takes for a bit later, about 5 minutes from now. But I think if they're in this situation next offseason, they're going to have to win. Arthur Smith in particular is going to have to win because you can't go 4-0 on playoff appearances. So I don't think that you're looking at drafting a quarterback in that range. Could you package some guys, move up, or picks, whatever it may be? Sure, why not? If you're going all in, and if you think your job is at risk, and you think that you need Caleb Williams or Drake May or Shador, whoever it may be, have at it. But again, do you want to put all your eggs into the rookie QB basket? I personally wouldn't. But
I don't think
again,
they will.
I guess,
No.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess it depends which QB it is among the incoming rookie class of next year. But again, it's October, and we're at that point right now where every incoming quarterback is the next, great thing. And it's like, that's a guy who can change a franchise for you. And it's like, you get to April and you have free agency done, and you're like, can that guy lead our locker room? If we need to make the playoffs, can that guy go out and win 10 games tomorrow or in 5 months? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you look around, like, this was supposed to be this really intriguing, good quarterback class. And I still think it will end up being that. But right now, just CJ Stroud is producing. The other ones, Anthony Richardson kind of half and half. Bryce Young is not. But, I mean, obviously that team is a disaster. So, I mean, that's not entirely his fault either. But it's tough for rookie quarterbacks to come in and just immediately win. And, it sort of is what it is. Yeah. All right. We got Nico with the $2. What's up, Nico? Says, evening, folks. Evening. As fantastic as Bijan's individual numbers have been, do you think the offense would benefit from Algier getting more carries? Spice it up, Also, maybe we could get Scotty Miller some catches as well. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, do you have a take on that, Daniel, in terms of getting Algier and Miller some more work?
Yeah, I mean, Algier is currently in the midst of the worst 2-game stretch of his career. 7 carries each of the last 2 weeks, 28 total yards. I'm not a math expert, but I believe that is 14 for 28, which is 2 yards a carry. That's not very good, Kevin. That is not very good. And again, I think Algier is from the moment that he arrived in Atlanta, the thing Arthur Smith continuously said about him is he's a sledgehammer. He's a wear you down kind of guy. And again, historically, he's been at his best late in games as a really, really strong finisher. And I think if you're not giving him the opportunity to wear down people, that you're kind of hurting his chances of being himself. But, at the same token, when he was in versus when Bijan was in, there was such a big difference in overall productivity on the ground. And I mean, with Patterson coming back, I'm very curious to see how he looks, whether that be week 5 that he kind of is worked into the offense a little bit more. But I personally am a proponent of more Algier touches because I think that we've seen that when he is at his best, he is a very, very integral part of what Atlanta wants to do. Very, very good fit for Arthur Smith. I think, if there's any player on the roster who embodies Arthur Smith, I think Tyler Algier is probably like top 5 on that list. And so I tend to think that making him, he's proven last year, the last 4 weeks, that he can carry an entire workload on the ground. You don't need him to be that kind of guy this year. But if you give him 10 to 12 touches, I mean, heck, week 1, he had 15 for 75 and a pair of touchdowns. I mean, that'll get the job done, Yeah. And so, again, I am absolutely a proponent. I think it'll only help Bijan as well because it's not a whole lot of fun tackling 220-pound Algier and then you see 215-pound Robinson come in and 220-pound Cordero Patterson come in. And then, you add in the real speed element there, Kevin Knight coming in off the bench. But no.
That 4.7 speed, bro. Deadly.
Burner.
I was fast in high school,
I've never run a 40. I actually was going to run a 60 over the summer. I got 10 yards off and I stumbled and pulled a hammy. That's why I write.
I think you were saying that. Yeah, you said that at camp. Yeah.
I did tell you that when we were talking about like media combine. Yeah.
You're like, no,
that's why
I don't touch that. Yeah.
My hammy is you know what? My hamstring is well recovered though. So it's all
good.
But yeah.
Off the IR.
Yeah. Thankfully. Short-term IR. But yeah, Scotty Miller, he does add an element of explosiveness that nobody else really has in Atlanta's receivers room. And so I think especially when the offense is struggling as much as it is right now, and the lack of big plays is so prevalent. There's for sure I guess I'd say a heightened interest in seeing him out there. But again, at the same token, you also have a quarterback who hasn't proven that he can consistently hit that throw. And again, I think there's value in having a field stretcher out there, if nothing other than the fact that it opens things up over the middle, kind of in that intermediate range where you can see a London or a Pitts really shine. But I think it'd be interesting because, again, what's been done the last 4 weeks hasn't really worked. I'm open to trying whatever else, what other options are on the table.
Right.
So I'm not against having more Scotty Miller snaps, but at the same token, with what we've seen out of Ridder, I'm not really sure it would particularly matter.
Yeah. That's kind of where I am, is that I think Scotty Miller has a role. His role hasn't changed, but because of the combination of Ridder's struggles and the pass protection, which was better last week, certainly. Because of those two things together, that's why he's not playing, because the protection can't hold up long enough to get the deep shot off. And even if it did, Ridder's not hitting it consistently at all. So the Falcons' offense is in a bad spot because of how this is going. Like teams are putting 8, 9, sometimes even 10 guys in the box, and they're just not afraid. They will give Ridder one-on-ones everywhere because they don't think he's going to throw it, and he's not going to be able to get it there. So until the Falcons do something about that, it's going to be tough sledding for a guy like Algier, who honestly did a good job last year of running against stacked boxes, but this is even worse than that. So it's, they basically need Bijan to play every snap because he is the offense. Like, he literally is the entire outside of Bijan explosive plays. I think London has maybe a couple. Pitts maybe has like one. There's just nobody. Like, Matt Collins has maybe one or two. Like, it's Bijan. Like, I think Bijan has 16 explosive plays so far. So like, quite literally, the offense is Bijan, and otherwise they need him. They can't just give it to a Bruiser and Algier at this point. They need Bijan out there generating explosive plays, or this offense is going to get bogged down, which unfortunately has happened constantly in the last 2 games.
Yeah. I think I had a tweet saying that same exact sentiment about 3 different times. I was just feeling it, that Bijan is the Falcons' entire offense. I legitimately, that was my thought process the entirety of Sunday. And that's following 3 weeks where he was taken up about 35 to 40% of Atlanta's offensive, yardage. So, I would completely agree that at this state, there is nobody on that Falcons offense who is more consistent, more explosive, more dynamic, more entertaining than Bijan. And again, you're seeing some of his leadership traits off the field start to show up as well, to the point to where I don't think it's a stretch to say that he is the face of the Falcons offense entering week 5 of his rookie year. I mean, like, when you ask people about Falcons offensive players, I tend to think Bijan will be just about top of the list. And the way that he conducts himself away from football, and obviously how special and vital he's proven to be on the football field. I don't think it's a stretch to put that type of, I mean, I remember people saying that he was already, the face back in May, June. That was a little rich for me. He's backed it up so far. So I'm not sure that was a take that, people were expecting or even asking for, but I wanted to fire that one off my chest tonight. So I feel a lot better now.
Get it out there.
But,
get the takes out there. That's what the show is for. That's what these live shows are for. This is like stream of consciousness Falcons takes. That's why we just end up places sometimes. But yeah,
Very
it's
true.
I mean, it is what it is. Like, the Falcons offense is not in a good spot, but when you have a guy like Bijan, you need to lean on him when you're having struggles. And, I mean, honestly, like, while they've been blown out on the scoreboard the last couple of weeks, they've been a player or two away from basically being tied at times in these games and having opportunities to win. And they just, unlike the first 2 games when they had stuff going their way, like, things are no longer going their way. Ridder is turning the ball over, and the plays that they need to make, they're just not getting made. Like, Drake London comes out, his foot comes down 1 inch out of bounds in the end zone and wipes a touchdown off the board that they don't get. So, you get that play, that Jaguars game is completely different. You're approaching the rest of that fourth quarter completely different. Not saying that they necessarily would have won, but, like, if they were marching down the field trying to tie the game at the end instead of being down 2 scores, I mean, probably feel a little bit differently about that game. But yeah, at this point, they're in a rough spot. But George dropping another banger here. So here we go, folks. George the $2 says, if you recall, I was the biggest Mariota hater that there was. Yes, I do remember that, George. I wanted Ridder to start because the deep throws couldn't possibly be any worse. Mitter said, hold my beer. You're just going to be blasted this. I'm so sorry, Desmond. Please turn off the program. You shouldn't be watching any Falcons media for a while. That would be my recommendation to you. But George says he's officially out on Ridder. He is not the guy. I'll even take Zach Wilson over him at this point. Well, I don't think I would go that far. Zach Wilson did have his best game ever as a pro last week, though, so good for him. But again, like, Zach Wilson is another, like, say Zach Wilson now just becomes a good quarterback. Like, that would be like the ultimate, like, thing to just throw in the faces of the people that, like, Ridder can't possibly make it. Well, Zach Wilson was, like, absolutely terrible for 3 years and then finally became, good. Like, I mean, that would just be hilarious. But it would be certainly an outlier, that's for sure. So I'm also not sold on Zach Wilson becoming anything. But yeah, we should get to the topic of Ridder. And you've tweeted a lot about it. You've written a lot of articles about it. And we've seen 8 games now, so half a season. We should have seen a lot more. I mean, I'm definitely not changing my mind about that they screwed up by not getting Ridder out there last season a lot more. And I think we're seeing that now for sure. But what do you think? Like, we've seen 8 games. I don't think we're closing the book on anything at this point, but what is your, like, because I scout quarterbacks off vibes. We know this. And the vibes are very bad right now for Desmond Ridder. Where are you right now in sort of how you're feeling about this whole situation?
Yeah, the vibes feel really low. I would definitely agree. Very, very in-depth analysis there. But yeah, no, I think I'll be honest with you. I'll be pretty frank. I'm kind of tired of everything, all the quarterback discourse. I'm tired of Monday 11 a.m. noon press conferences, having to have Arthur Smith say week after week, this guy's my quarterback. This guy's my quarterback. I'm not making a change. Hey, Arthur, why are you sticking with him? It's just what we're doing. It's been that way for like a year now. I'm so ready for some kind of resolution. I thought we had resolution last year for at least a short time span when Ridder came in after the bye week. Then you start this year, and it took 4 weeks. Took 4 weeks to get right back on that train. Completely warranted questions. I have these same questions. It's just so frustrating, mentally tiring. I think, again, frustrating is a word I'm just going to keep coming back to. I think with Ridder, 8 games is, again, like you said, half a season. 8 games of he's 4-4. He has not lost at home. He has not won away from home. His numbers, I want to say he has eclipsed 200 yards passing 5 out of the 8 games. One of those was like 201. So he's been above 202 passing yards or more in half of those games, and he's been below it in half of those games. I think you reach a point where the guy kind of just is what he is. And again, the Zach Wilson example, the first thing I thought about was the meme of the guy who's like addicted to gambling, who's just like drilling away. And then he finally leaves right before he finally wins big. I don't think you can legitimately run an NFL organization that way. I love that meme. I really do. But I don't think you can, if you're Arthur Smith and you're Terry Fontenot, I don't think you can afford to run your organization like that. And so as of right now, again, I can't say that I'm completely out on the guy because it is still, an obligation to try to open up as many possibilities as I can for him to, prove himself. I think I'm probably contractually obligated to say that. At this point, I've already probably said too much anyways, but at this point I'm just out there. So I think
it's okay. It's okay to like not be sold on him. Like, I don't think you're saying he can never become anything in the NFL. You're saying that, look, it's been 8 games. I'm not impressed, basically.
Yeah. And I think not impressed is probably an understatement. I think, I'll be honest with you. halftime of the Green Bay game, and then that first drive of the second half that Arthur Smith said after the game was like the worst drive they had all game. That in between time of that first drive of the second half, that second drive of the second half, my mind kind of started to turn of like, okay, this is not very good. The Carolina game, you score 17 points off of Jesse Bates turnovers. Offense manufactured 7 real points in that game. The Green Bay game, I thought Ridder found a rhythm from about halfway through the third quarter, and then thereon, I thought that was a legitimate NFL quarterback who was playing at a pretty decent level. I wrote after that game that if he can continue to play at that level, the Falcons have a guy who they can legitimately and feasibly field for the next however many years that they want to, and have a shot of winning football games pretty reasonably, because that was played at a pretty good level of football. And as we've talked about, the talent around him offensively, defensively is so, it's there. They have the pieces in place to be good if he can play at a decent level. And in the 8 quarters since that game and since that feelings, I left that game against Green Bay thinking that Atlanta had something potentially legitimate with Ridder. And the 8 quarters since then, I have not felt anything close to that. So, I think, again, he's got time. He's young. We can talk about the sample size all we want to. His is kind of a bit weird because he had, a abbreviated rookie year, and then he has the entire offseason pretty much from, I think it was about March 30th onward, knowing he was the guy. And so it's not a apple for apple or whatever the saying is example. But again, he is still young. I think D'Amico Ryan said today he needs time, and you can tell that he needs time. I question if he has enough upside to warrant the time it might take from what he's shown so far and how far away he appears to be.
Yeah. And I know there's a couple things that you got to a lot of it there. Everyone, and it's going to happen a lot this week because they're playing each other, but CJ Stroud has come up a lot in comparison to Ridder. I wrote a very poorly worded tweet about how you shouldn't compare Stroud and Ridder. And what I meant to say was that you shouldn't make CJ Stroud your barometer for what a quarterback should look like in their first few starts, because CJ Stroud has played the best 4-game start of any quarterback since Joe Burrow. And we've had 8-10 rookies come through in that time frame, more maybe other guys that weren't first rounders, that have had very poor starts. Like, it's very rare to have that type of start. Before Joe Burrow, I don't remember the last guy that had a start that good. So yes, like, CJ Stroud is clearly a better prospect than Desmond Ridder. Maybe some people were arguing that like he wasn't at some point. I don't know. I certainly was like, yeah, sure, he's a better prospect, but they're not going to trade up, which we knew that. They did not do that. So that's why we weren't really considering it. Should they have? Maybe. Sure, hindsight's 2020. Now that we know Ritter's maybe not it, now of course they should have traded up, but that's not how it works in this business. That's if you're analyzing stuff after the fact, it doesn't really do anything for you, because we all have the benefit of hindsight now. Bijan's a good player. It's not like they drafted a bad player. Maybe they should have gone up for a quarterback, whatever. But so that I would not really focus on Stroud. Now, if you want to compare Ridder to like all these rookie quarterbacks and quarterbacks over the past several years, he's still behind. Like, he has been one of the worst starters in that time span, and he is now officially, after Zach Wilson's last game, the worst starting quarterback in the NFL, statistically speaking. So that is obviously not going to cut it, and Ridder's in a rare sort of awkward position, because this is now the 3rd year of this regime. They need to start winning, and they know that. So I think it's a little bit different than 2022 because of that. I know people are like, oh, well, Smith played Mariota for 14 games. Very stupidly, yes, but he did. So people are like, oh, well, that means he'll stick with Ridder forever. I don't think that's the case, especially if it's this bad, because Mariota didn't get this bad until like week 8, 9 or so. And then that's when we really started being like, okay, we got to do something. Ridder is now at that level week 3, week 4. So what do you think about the potential timeline? Because we're not calling for Ridder to be benched right now, folks. Relax. We're both hoping that he turns it on, he still has plenty of time to do that. He's not going to get benched in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't say, unless it's catastrophic. But do you think that there is a faster timeline for some of the reasons I said, or other reasons that are on your mind?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a very, very accelerated timeline in comparison to last year, really for a number of factors. As you mentioned, it's year 3 as opposed to year 2. We heard him talk about at camp how, they had a 3-year plan. This is year 3. They expect to win in year 3. And I think that alone adds pressure, adds expectations that you're supposed to win. We heard him set standards pretty much all offseason about how this team is supposed to be new and much improved and legitimately winning football games at a much more consistent rate than years past. And again, I think the other thing that is very important in this conversation, they didn't play Ridder last year because they felt like he wasn't ready for it. There's no question that Heineke is ready to play an NFL game tomorrow. He can play. He has started 30-something games, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say he started I'm not sure the exact number, but he's definitely
for our reference.
Yeah, I want to say 33, but that might be the number of games that Eli Ankus played. I'll be honest with you, because I was looking
I think it is
today.
33. Yeah, so he has
played
in. Yeah, he has been active for 33 games, and has started 25 since 2017.
Heineke?
Yes.
Okay, 33. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So again, I believe 2021 wasn't it that he was Washington's full-time starter?
That's right. Started 15 games.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a guy who has proven that he can play in the NFL. This is not the same situation as a coaching staff saying, we have Mariota, who hasn't proven to be a great option, but we have a quarterback behind him who we don't think is ready and is probably an even worse option in this moment. This is a situation of, we sold everybody, including our owner, on this guy being our franchise quarterback. He's not delivering, but we do have this guy who's proven he can play and proven he can at least be an average to mediocre quarterback, which at this point, Ridder is playing below average, if not worse than that. And so I think it's going to be telling. I think it's going to be really telling. I wrote about this on Monday, actually, about how there's like I think there's going to be I think we're going to learn a lot about the ego and the pride of Fontenot and Arthur Smith. When you sell Calais Campbell, for example, he's the first name that really came to mind for me. When you sell him on Ridder being a quarterback who can win, and he comes in, you can't just pull him after 4 weeks. You can't pull him after 6 weeks, I would think, unless you legitimately reach a point where you know that Heineke is a better option. And so I think at this point, from what Heineke's done in his NFL career, what Ridder's put on tape through 8 weeks, Heineke looks like the better option. That said, am I advocating for it? Not at all, because again, you've put so much into the Ridder basket that moving away from him after 4 games is a very, very bad look. Losing games in year 3 at a level to where you're on track to not make the playoffs is also a bad look, though. And so I think that's where you're going to learn a lot about, again, the ego and the character of management of the entire offensive coaching staff. And I think that'll be entertaining to watch play out. But again, completely different. Arthur Smith admitted that Monday, completely different quarterback situation this year as opposed to last year. Because really the starter situation completely flipped. Last year you had a veteran. This year you got an inexperienced guy who the veteran at least proved, at least early in the year, that he could play at an average level. This year you've got an inexperienced guy who hasn't really proven he can play consistently at an average to above average level. You got a backup last year who hadn't proven anything, and you got a backup this year who has. So I think the conversation is completely different. And to answer the overall question, I think no question that this is a kind of situation where I believe the bye week's middle of November, early to mid-November, that if they wanted to make that change, and again, that's the other part of it. It's not the same deal this year, because last year it was, we want the rookie to have the bye week so he can learn not offense, but, learn the chemistry, learn how to prepare, whatever it may be, or, whatever argument you may have had in that time. This year, you don't really need that bye week per se. It's always kind of preferred, I would imagine. But again, mid-November, I believe that's around week 10-ish, week 11-ish.
Week 11 is technically when their bye is, yeah.
Yeah, week 11. Yeah, I would say that's probably maybe a bit too late
Yeah.
from when I think, because again, by that point you should know. But again, I don't think it'll be like within the next 2 weeks. I think
No,
that'd be rather.
I think he has
So
at least the next 2 games.
yeah,
But it just depends. Like if he's like mediocre, he's probably not getting yoinked. But if he's like last week, it's a different story. It's complicated because it depends. Like it depends on how he plays. Like if he looks better, then he'll probably keep playing. But if he continues to basically tank the offense, then it's gonna ramp up much faster. So there's levels to it. It's complicated. Like, I tweeted out probably infamously, going forward, that like, oh, it's only been 7 games. We don't know what he is yet. And then like he just proceeds to have like the worst game we've ever seen the next week. So like, there are people like, oh, is 8 games enough? Yeah, maybe 8 games is enough now. Yeah, maybe that is no. But it's very tragic timing on that tweet. But it could change. Like they could go out and whoop the Texans this week, and then the timeline's been reset. And we're hopeful again. I mean, when you're on a losing streak, everything sucks. Everything looks terrible. And Heineke's not some savior either. Like I think Joe was talking about it in the chat. Like Heineke's not this like guy who's going to come in and like now we're going to be throwing for 300 yards a game and just cooking people. I do think Heineke can have success here. Because the same reasons we thought Ridder could have success here. They just need a game manager, someone that could go out there and distribute the ball. Heineke's going to be aggressive, so it'll be a little bit of a different flavor than probably what they were planning for. But and Heineke's going to turn the ball over, but instead of turning the ball over on like short to intermediate passes, he's going to arm punt the hell out of it. So I would prefer that, for the record, to what we're getting now. But Heineke is he was a backup for a reason. He's a 500 quarterback. I think that's what he is. Like with Heineke as your starter, if he doesn't have any elite team around him, he's probably going to get you to 500. And that's better than a lot of quarterbacks can do, like in terms of backups. But, he's not going to be a long-term option for this team. But in terms of this year, like they do need to start winning. And I agree with you. And that's what I've been getting at to some people is like, look, this is not the same situation as 2022 where Mariota, they thought, gave him the best chance to win. And this was a weak division where it was for the taking, so they were still in it despite having a losing record and all this stuff. This year, they have aspirations of actually legitimately winning this division outright, having a winning record, all that stuff. The defense is clearly good enough to get them there. And the rest of the offense should be too. So now it's not, oh, we're going to go to a rookie, mid-season, and who knows what we're going to get. It's like, no, we're going to go to a veteran that we know should at least be further along in terms of the mental aspect of the game. Because that's where the problems have been, I think, the most for Ridder, is with the mental stuff. He's not reading the field well. He's not getting the ball to the right receiver. He's not seeing the open man. And he's missing the timing on these quick developing things, too. He's running into pressure. I mean, the offensive line definitely, like, especially week 3, they doomed week 3. Like that, Ridder didn't play well in week 3, but the offensive line did him zero favors in that one. This last week, it was not the offensive line's problem. It was Ridder just not seeing the field, not doing it. So yeah, I think the timeline is different, like we were saying. Like we're much more likely to get Heineke sooner, especially if Ridder's catastrophically bad, because not only is it year 3, they have aspirations to win. Like they know fans are really fed up, and like this team is fed up too. Like I think the whole Mac Hollins thing is overblown, but we saw that, and that was the first crack. That was the first like crack in the armor, in my opinion, was seeing Mac Hollins that mad on the sideline. Maybe it wasn't specifically directed at Ridder, like he said. Maybe it was. We'll never really know. But the other thing was, like, I'm sure you saw the press conference, on Monday. I didn't get this ringing endorsement of Ridder in that press conference like we saw from Mariota for a long time, where it was like, no, we're not considering a change. Am I just imagining things, or did you not get that endorsement at all? And sort of like, oh, so I sort of got more of like, we're evaluating this week to week vibes from Arthur Smith.
Yeah, so when I was working on, I put out an article on that after the fact and kind of like recapping the top points of that. I kept searching, trying to find some type of like take home point for the positive pro Ridder crowd of like, Arthur Smith saying like, yeah, he's had great command, great poise, great leadership. There really wasn't that in there. It was a lot of, yeah, he played a good second half. you know, or at least he was improved in the second half. I didn't even say it was a good second half. We said it was improved, a step forward with operation, a cleaner second half, I think is the exact terminology that he used. There was never a point in there where he was like legitimately excited or like emphatic about it. I mean, there was at the start when Mike asked him about, you know, is he your guy? He's like, absolutely. You know, I wouldn't be pontificating. Shout out Arthur Smith, by the way. Love the use of pontificate. I believe that's 3 times now last week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very impressive out of him. But yeah, I mean, it's like there was never last year to me with Mariota, there was consistently, yeah, I mean, his legs are really valuable and what he's doing on the ground is really challenging opponents and things of that nature. With Ridder, there hasn't really been anything. And I personally was happy that Arthur chose not to take that route because there's not really a whole lot of stuff to talk about in a positive light. It's not like Mariota last year where he's beating people with his legs and he's at least adding that element to it. There's really not that presence that's there. Against Detroit, they had 44 rushing yards, in part because of how bad the offensive line struggled that day, of course. That was the lowest they'd had since November of 2021. That's, again, in part, as you mentioned earlier, when they're stacking 8 to 9 guys in the box because they're going to make Ridder beat you and he can't do it, that if you're Arthur Smith, there are no positives there because you can't just call a read option and say, hey, I know that Ridder's going to go pick me up 25 yards or whatever, maybe because I remember last year with Marcus, he ripped quite a few of those. And it always kind of added that extra presence that Ridder hasn't really shown apart from the Green Bay game, you know, where I believe he had about 40-something rushing yards in that game where he at least had some type of threat.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, I mean, he'll continue doing that as long as it won't hurt the team. It significantly helped the team, I felt, and we just haven't seen it really implemented much.
He's so uncomfortable running. He has all the ability to do it. That's never been in question. He just doesn't like it. He's not comfortable doing it.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you brought that up because it doesn't feel like he's comfortable doing anything right now. And I don't know how else to frame it. He does not feel comfortable reading a defense. He doesn't feel comfortable. The one throw in the first half, the entire first half in London, where he caught it, had a rhythm turn and throw, was a pick six.
It was so like pretty up until that. Yeah.
It was. It looked so good. And I was like, oh, this could be really good. And then you just see, boom.
Hit the guy right in stride. Yeah. Just wasn't on offense.
Did. Yeah. Great throw if you're a Jaguars fan. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't get the feeling. I thought Arthur was very open about it. That was one of my takeaways for sure. And he was open about it today. Again, they asked him about it today, and he was very open. And, you know, some of the things that he said in there about what it might take for a change. And there was never, I think in years past, you would hear him say, like, look, guys, we're not making a change. It's not going to happen. Stop asking me about it. This year, no, he is giving you lengthy answers about this. He might not have thought about it at halftime Sunday.
No, and I don't blame him for not doing that. I mean, also, like,
8-hour flights give you a lot of time to think about stuff. 8-hour flights back after losing by 16 and after being outscored by 30 in the last 2 weeks will give you a lot to think about. And I think you could tell that the wheels are turning. And again, when you start getting asked about this stuff, it's typically a really bad indication of where things are headed. As we saw last year, starting about week 5, started a week earlier this year. We'll see if it ends a week earlier or a couple weeks earlier, if at all.
So. If he's playing this bad, it's not going to last. But I don't. Yeah, I hope it's not this bad for all of our sakes.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of all I got. I didn't leave that press conference thinking like Arthur's completely committed and sold on what Ridder's put up. And I mean, how could you be? So
yeah. No, and I actually appreciate that about Arthur. There was no water carrying for Ridder this week. I think in weeks past he was like, we're behind him and all that, and like there was not really any reason not to be. Week 3, first loss, no one's panicking, but it's not the fact that they've lost 2 games, because 2-2, like that's what I predicted. Were you thinking they'd probably be 2-2 at this point as well?
Yep.
Yeah. So like record wise, we're right on track. Like I'm not concerned about the record. They're not in any danger. They're perfectly fine. The NFC South, they're a game back with 2 games to go against the team in first place. So like they have no concerns. They're not like the Bengals. They're not like all these teams that are 1-3 that are really desperate and really falling behind. The record is not a problem. It's like how it looked and the fact that it got worse. Like it's all about what are we seeing week to week? Are we getting a little bit better? Even if it's a small improvement, that doesn't get you benched typically. But if it's stalled out or getting worse, especially worse, that is what gets guys pulled, especially quarterbacks. And again, and this is, I think I was starting to talk about this earlier, and then I went off on some other tangent. But Ritter's in a unique situation because he's a third round pick. So first of all, it's great if he becomes your starter because he's just a third round pick. He didn't cost you much. He doesn't cost you almost anything against the cap. But it's a double-edged sword because now when he's struggling, you don't really have any commitment to him financially or draft-wise. You did not invest first-round picks. You did not invest big money. So you can just cut bait, or you just make him a backup and develop him because he's just a third-round pick. So it cuts both ways. Like if it works out, you look like a genius, and if it doesn't work out, it was a third round pick and a guy who's making like $1.5 million. So, and again, like Ridder, I think like as a backup, you'd probably be okay with this level of play. I mean, obviously you'd be hoping for more, probably, but like he's not like, I mean, I don't think he's gonna get benched and then cut and then be out of the NFL. Like, I mean, he's not on that trajectory at this stage, but because of his draft status, because of the lack of investment, I also think that might contribute to what could be an earlier benching than normal. Like the Panthers aren't going to bench Bryce Young because he's struggling. I mean, and obviously that team's in a very different place too. But like, Kenny Pickett with the Steelers, they're not going to bench him. They invested a first round pick, so like it's a different situation for Ridder, I feel like. And it's a situation that's really going to turn up the heat on him this season.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Arthur Smith used the phrase fanatical hype or something along those lines, talking about he's interesting, man. He's been throwing out some words lately.
He's had some bangers. Yeah.
He has. I wish there was like an Arthur Smith like Twitter vocabulary account that just kept track of this stuff. You know what? That might not be a bad idea for somebody in chat or even one of us. I mean, because I think I could grow that brand pretty well. But
you're doing too much, Daniel. You need to calm down. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, I can't add one more thing to my plate. No, that's too much.
Yeah, well, let someone in the chat take that on. Yeah,
I'll let George Costanza take that one. He seems like he's got some passion to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, I think you're completely right about it. It's not the same deal. And again, you can try to morph it into however you want to about their expectations for him. And I do think that's important because no matter where they draft him, when you're selling to the owner, when Arthur Blank comes out and says, yeah, I think this guy's our franchise quarterback, or like, whatever word for word he said in camp, I tend to think that does carry some weight. But from an actual roster building perspective, there's such little investment there. And I don't think they're going to hesitate on that front as far as there's not more of a factor here at play other than what I mentioned earlier of can they put the ego aside when it comes down to level of play of what they sold other people. There's not like there's that part of it and there's a first round pick contract investment. There's only the real one factor you have to overcome here. It's not like we're looking at 2 or 3 really big mountains to climb. It's really just the one. And I think there's going to be a point in time where if this level of play continues, that's a very, very big if. Because again, through 2 weeks when the Falcons are winning and you see flashes of a good throw here, a good throw there, or a really good quarter and a half against Green Bay that has some random guy writing about how Ridder could be, the guy for a couple of years down the road. It's me. I'm the random guy. There's to me, if there's more of those flashes, then I think the entire conversation shifts and can shift within a week, within a game, within a quarter.
Yeah.
It can change that fast. It's just, if it's a first round pick, it's possible that, or, a guy with higher investment, like you look at what the Giants have and Daniel Jones right now, who's playing at a very low level, making $40 million. They're stuck, when you have a guy like Ridder on the contract that he's on with a third round pick investment to him, there's really, that's actually Jones is a perfect example of what I'm trying to express here. You've got the contract at play there. You've got the fact that people committed to play in New York, knowing that they've got this quarterback who the whole organization thinks is a guy because they just paid him $40 million for it, and who just let him. Again, they were a playoff team last year, so it's not exactly the same situation because there's at least some proof there when you're committing to that. But I
I
still
would
think
argue
with
the
Ridder,
opposite, that we knew who Daniel
yeah,
Jones was, that he was not worth
that's
40
fair.
million. But yes, that's
That's
another
completely fair.
rant. Yeah, that's a different rant.
That is completely fair, actually.
Yeah.
That is completely fair. But I'm just saying, like, from a team building perspective, if they're like, yeah, this guy led us into a playoff berth last year, won a playoff game, whatever, whatever their argument was with people, they're looking at 2 or 3 hills to climb there instead of just the one of, hey, we sold everybody here that he's our guy. Turns out he's not our guy, so we're gonna roll with this guy. So it's definitely an interesting conversation, definitely way different than last year's conversation. And I think also the other part of it is that if you punt on Ridder now, you are entirely committing yourself to having to search for a brand new quarterback in the offseason, which then completely puts the future of the organization up for grabs. Whereas in an ideal world, Ridder proves he's the guy, and you want to keep on letting him have opportunity after opportunity, because if he proves he's the guy, completely changes the entire trajectory of your franchise for the next however many years. Because again, at least the next 2 when you've got him on a 3rd round pick contract. So
Yeah.
It's just my take on it.
No, I mean, I think you're right. And I think they would have loved for that to happen. And I think that's part of the reason they did it, is because, like, if it hits, then you look like geniuses and you're in a great situation from a team building and other perspective. But also, there was a pretty good chance that it, would not work, statistically speaking, or that he would just be sort of middling. And right now we're not even there. So I think it's a situation where you could see them cut bait quickly in terms of their belief in him as the future starter. But yes, they did everything preseason, and I think it was all consistent. Like, they named Ridder the starter, they got behind him, they made him the starter the whole time. They basically set him up as best they could this offseason. We've talked about how they probably should have given him more reps in the preseason, that sort of thing, whatever. But in terms of, they got the management behind him, the team behind him, he never had to worry about anyone looking over his shoulder. He could just focus on getting the offense down and being the starter. But I think that only extended to the start, going into the season, he was the starter. I think honestly, they weren't really committed to him past that point. At that point, anything could happen. It was up to him to continue to earn the starting job. Again, this is not a 1st round pick. This is not a guy you paid money to, where the expectation is that you're going to be the starter, even if you're struggling, because we have no other choice. With Ridder, it's, you need to continue, you need to show something, or we need to be winning games for you to keep playing. But if he's costing them games, they're going to probably move on faster than people probably expected going into the season, because they're not committed long term if he doesn't prove it. And Taylor Heinicke's not the worst backup plan, and he has all those incentives in his contract for a reason. Is all I'll say about that. Taylor Heinicke, I think, is a savvy businessman, and maybe made a very smart decision signing in Atlanta this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, I think with Heinicke, it goes back to that conversation we were kind of having earlier with him, and I think he raises the ceiling. Again, assuming that we keep on saying the same Ridder that we have really throughout the entire offseason and through the first 4 weeks, where he just can't hit a deep ball. And it's all underneath, all intermediate. And when he's in rhythm and at his best, you're seeing offensive movement, but it's not really easy offensive movement. I think Heinicke raises that ceiling. And I think, because again, you're going to see, he might end up with a very similar stat line of Ridder, but he's going to get there in a completely different way, which is kind of interesting if you think about it, because you're going to see more big plays. You're going to see, I was going to say, more turnover-worthy throws. Ritter's leading the NFL in turnover-worthy throws right now, if I'm not mistaken,
yes,
in percentage and an actual number of throws. So from that perspective, the downside's not really that extreme, And so I think that's kind of, if you're holding out hope of trying to see more offensive explosion, and again, maybe there's for sure an image of how people want an NFL offense to look. I think you see how the Chiefs play and some of these other teams who are just, really just wearing people out through the air. And it's so fun to watch those teams. And you see the Falcons play and they're just straining for 220 passing yards a week. I'm pretty sure when Ridder hit 237 or 39 against Green Bay or whatever it was, I want to say that was the most that the Falcons had since Mariota on Halloween last year.
Yeah.
Or against Carolina. Halloween last year. And then prior to that, I think that was Mariota's only passing game of the year. So that was like at that level. So that was like the second highest passing performance the Falcons had and probably since the Matt Ryan year of 21. So like you look at that, you look at the way the Falcons offense is built, it's not supposed to be air heavy, but you would at least hope that it could at least be some kind of balance. And just right now, there's no balance. If anything, it's just dragging down. And I think that to me is the biggest indictment on Ridder is when you physically can't run the football. Bijan was able to do it against Jacksonville. Is that because Bijan is just ridiculously special? Or is that because the Falcons are kind of figuring some things out, probably somewhere in the middle? But again, it's kind of like what you said with Ridder. Once you reach a point where he's just legitimately dragging you down and you just physically, when your quarterback is losing you games, the conversation of the whole offseason was, can he just not lose the Falcons games to make the playoffs? That was the conversation, is can he be good enough to where he's not losing you games? He does not have to go out and win you games. He does not have to play hero ball. That is an exact quote that I gave somebody this summer. He does not have to play hero ball. Right now, he's just playing villain ball at times, It feels like. So that's my personal feeling on the situation is if you get more performances like Jacksonville, where he's legitimately costing you points and costing you time and time again and just physically can't even create points, let alone prevent the other team from adding points to it, you're at such a net loss already that it's just, you might as well just completely punt on the situation.
Yeah, it's a bad spot to be in. I mean, and I was saying it last week. It's kind of worst case scenario that we're already talking about benching Ridder 4 games in. That's pretty much as bad as it could be. So certainly pulling for the young man. He's got a future ahead of him in the NFL. His story's not yet written, but he's in a bad spot because of where he was drafted and because of the expectations. Like that's why I feel like the team did him a disservice by not playing him more last year. Maybe last year you see these issues and you're able to work on them more in this offseason, or maybe you see that he's just not ready, so we really do need to get another guy in here. Instead, he gets all the hype this offseason. I mean, in the hype, like I think nobody was hyping him up as this like he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but I think the perspective was like maybe he could be a solid game manager for us and keep the offense afloat with this team built around him. And now the expectations are a lot higher, like where it's like this team should be winning games with the roster they have. And now it's just obvious that the quarterback is causing big problems. So, I hope for the best. I hope he can pull it together. Because long-term, obviously that's still for the best for this team. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Obviously hoping for the best here. We did have one final donation from Noah C. With the $5. He says, trade Pitts and give him the career he deserves. Tank the season. Go all in on a QB in the next draft. It's QB heavy. Yeah, so love Noah, by the way, our mod. Thanks for policing the chat, Noah. So let me real quick address the Kyle Pitts trade thing. And not Noah knows that I know he's a good sport, so I'll come at him a little bit here. No, it's just not his problem necessarily. But they're not going to trade Kyle Pitts. If they trade Kyle Pitts, they're probably getting fired. Like they can't do that. And if they wanted to trade Kyle Pitts, they couldn't do it now either because his value is the lowest it's ever been. So you're going to get bad value and you're punting on a 4th overall pick from a couple of years ago that you failed to utilize properly. And they'd basically be admitting that they screwed that up. They're not going to do it. You could make an argument, oh, maybe they should or they shouldn't or whatever, but they will not trade Kyle Pitts under any circumstances. It's just not going to happen. So,
it's not. If it happens, I would be stunned. It's not gonna happen. I don't think there's any plausible way that it happens. Any reason that it would happen. I do like the idea that Noah had there. Right? Yeah. Shout out Noah C. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to be good with the names here. I'm still trying to work my way up the rotation a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
so
he's getting it. Yeah.
But, so I like the idea of trying to maximize Pitt's career. I do like that. I think there's still a plausible route to where he can have a very good career in Atlanta, and hopefully we'll see that happen. Hopefully, as you were saying, Kevin, hopefully that Ridder has a great career along with him, and we watch them blossom, and we watch, we look back on this podcast and these first 4 weeks of Pitt struggling and Ridder struggling and all of this stuff as just, early career growing pains for Ridder, and Pitts being an innocent bystander of that. Hopefully it all works out for the sake of the Falcons organization. Um, as of right now, the odds of that happening don't appear to be too terribly high. But again, always gonna hope for the best there.
Yes, and no one on this program is actively rooting against any Falcons players, and I think if you do that, it's real loser mentality, real pathetic behavior. So, criticizing is not the same thing as rooting against. You're allowed to criticize. True. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, hopefully we'll get a bounce back this week, and we can put these difficult discussions to bed for a little while longer. Or it's an insane crash and burn, and we can accelerate the timeline even faster. Because this purgatory is the worst part of coverage. It's just so depressing. So I think we're just let's get to one or the other as soon as possible. That would be my preference.
Just get me out of the purgatory, man. Just get me out of it. I mean, it is. X is not a whole lot of fun this time of year, or like in these situations. And actually watching the games and watching everything play out with all that is going on, it's always entertaining. It's just not exactly. I think everybody would be a whole lot more enjoyable if this whole situation was just figured out. So hopefully, if not this year, hopefully it's next year. Because again, we all just really want to see positive things out of the organization. I mean, it's a fan base that has been so passionate this year, so far, last year, especially early in the year, and even middle part of the year when Atlanta was still kind of in that race for the NFC South. There was still, I think the Falcons fan base is just waiting to just erupt for something extremely positive. I mean, when it was 2-0, man, like when they were 2-0, the amount of positive messages, overall positivity was so much fun. That was a great week. That was a legitimately great week up until getting shelled 20-6 and showing like no signs of life. But again, that's beside the point. We'll end on a high note. It's I want to see the fan base get something super positive and really get what they deserve for the amount of time and effort and passion that they've put in the organization.
Yeah, and hope we can get some positivity going. Hope we can get back into winning football. It's certainly possible, but Texans no longer are a pushover. So I think everyone was hoping this would be a pushover get right game, and it's not the case. So yeah, Texans really coming together quick here.
Yeah, that was a game I thought would be like easy win, chalk it up, like preseason schedule prediction, easy win. No, that is a team that, frankly, this is probably about the worst time you could play them because they're young, they're improving, and they got a whole lot of confidence right now. So, I don't think they'll end up being the type of team where you look back at them at the end of the year and they're like, 10-7. They'll probably be more in that 7-10, 6-11 range. And they kind of need that one game where they're kind of brought back to reality. Hopefully the Falcons are the team that can bring them back down. But again, you'd always like to be the team that's after that game or whatever it may be, coming into it, because the Texans are riding a very big wave right now of positive momentum.
Yeah, well, can Ridder stay undefeated at home? That's the big question. Maybe he's just a different player at home. Yeah, he's 4-4. 4 at home, 4 on the road. So, we'll see how that goes. But definitely hoping for some more positivity, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to tonight's show. Really appreciate Daniel's time. Daniel Flick at @ByDanielFlick on the Twitters. Daniel, anything else you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
You can find my articles at si.com/NFL/Falcons. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope to see you again sometime whenever it's my turn in the batting order.
Yes. Our pinch hitter tonight with Adnan possibly abducted by Matt Ryan. We'll get some intrepid reporting on that for you guys for the next show. But guys, also thank you for tuning in. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed tonight's discussion. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Appreciate everyone for hanging out tonight. Guys, appreciate it. Lot to cover, lots of problems with the offense, and we're gonna try to get into as many aspects of it as we can. I know we really wanted to hit on the Ridder thing tonight, but I know Joe Schmo has been clamoring for a play calling discussion. So we're gonna try to get that for you, Joe. I know we really want to, make sure we can give you a breakdown. I just haven't had time to do like a full all 22 watch to be able to bring you that level of analysis, where I could feel like it was confident about it. But we're working on it. Well, and we obviously we have Jordan for the offensive defensive line takes on the early week shows. So we'll try to bring you as much of a multifaceted approach as we can going forward. But guys, thanks again for tuning in here on the Falcoholic Live. We will see you on Friday next for our game preview. We'll have a Texans guest joining us for that one. And then we will be back, of course, for another post-game show. This one, thankfully, a little bit later in the afternoon. Was not, loving that early morning wake up. But, guys, thank you so much. We will see you next time. Have a great night.